coming to you from Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome to the Wisdom Speaks Podcast. I'm your host, Reverend Lanico Cash. Join me here every week as I challenge our culture's very common misconceptions about faith and address the concepts of faith that have been deemed unacceptable and displeasing to God. I'm so glad you're joining me today. Imagine being in a place where the things that you want the most, the things that you think you should be trying to do, just won't work. The things that you thought that you should be trying to do just won't work. That house that you're trying to buy doesn't seem to be going through. The deal keeps shutting down. That car you're after, or that job you're after, or even that career that you're after, it just seems to not be happening. The more you try, the more you find yourself trying to figure out what is going on. That business that you have been trying to start, and you think you have a good idea. You believe yourself to have a really good idea. But it just doesn't seem to be popping off. Well, beloved, we're here today to talk about wisdom and what that means. And the very first thing that we must understand about having wisdom and about getting wisdom from God is that submission to God is going to be your foundation. No matter what you are out here trying to do, no matter what you may be out here trying to attain, you have to remember that submission to God, and you have to know that submission to God is the foundation of even having the capacity and even having the ability to accept and to even attain any real understanding of about our lives and about your life. And so if we're going to gain wisdom, we have to understand that truth first and foremost. Hence the scripture from Proverbs, chapter 1, verse 7. And it reads, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." And in order to understand that verse, we have to understand that we have to be in a posture. First, we have to get ourselves in a posture to where we are submitted to God first. And then that house you're trying to buy, you'll understand which one is right for you. That career and that job that you're after, you'll then understand if that's the best thing for you. That business you're trying to start, you'll understand the timing better when you have the wisdom and when you are submitted to God first. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So what is wisdom? If we're going to be talking about it, we're going to be talking about the things that wisdom is going to cost you. Because it is going to cost you some things, beloved. And you got to know that. When we're walking in the will of God and when we're walking with God, we got to know that with wisdom is going to cost you some things. It's going to cost you some things. So first and foremost, what is wisdom? Well, according to the dictionary, or Google, if you will, what Google says it this way, that wisdom is the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. It's the quality of being wise. And I like to say it this way, that wisdom is simply having the ability to apply truth. So here's the thing. There is truth, right? There's a lot of truth out there, and it's really easy to get access to, right? And it's easy to gain truth. It's easy to find truth, rather. But wisdom takes it a step further and says, okay, you know this truth. Now, how do you apply it? And it's the ability to have what I would call a soundness to your decisions, a soundness to your ability to judge well. That's how I'll say it. It's the ability to judge well. That's what having wisdom is. And it's so important to know this, because when we have knowledge, it's one thing we think we know what wisdom is, but until it starts to cost us something, then you start wondering, when your good judgment starts to cost you something, you start trying to figure out what's going on. Beloved, what it is that you are gaining wisdom. God is giving you wisdom, and that's why it's costing you some things. So let's talk about that. So let me give you point one. Wisdom is going to cost you. If you're going to have this level of understanding of what is best for your life, and have this sort of understanding to where you can judge situations well, and you can know and you can judge well what you need to do, where you need to go, the direction you may need to go in, the way in which you may need to pivot. If you're going to have this level of understanding that God is going to give you, you got to first of all understand that it's going to cost you relationships. It's going to cost you your relationships. What do I mean? It's going to cost you your family relationships. It's going to cost you your friends, your co-workers. Because here's the thing. Here's the reasoning behind that. The more that God wants to impart to you, the more separated you're going to find yourself becoming from certain people. And those certain people can include anybody, from family members to friends. I mean close friends, friends you once understood, friends you once had a tight bond with, friends that once knew your thoughts, right? But then once you start growing in wisdom, once you start growing in this knowledge and this ability to judge well, those kinds of things change. They seem to change. And those relationships as a result change. Because the people who once knew you the best, or who once thought they knew you the best, starts to wonder. They might start to wonder, okay, you used to think this way. You used to feel this way about a certain thing. And then your relationships can start to change. And so it's going to cost you your relationships. The family members who really thought they knew you and really thought they knew what was best for you, all of a sudden don't understand you. All of a sudden don't understand why you're making the decisions you're making. All of a sudden don't understand why you need to go in a different direction. All of a sudden they don't understand your newfound understanding of the way your life needs to operate. And so sometimes, unfortunately, that's going to cost you the people who were once, who has been closest to you. Sometimes. And not all of them, but sometimes. And you got to be ready for that. You got to understand what's going on. You got to know that when you are gaining wisdom and when God is dealing on you and with you and for you, then that's going to change some things. That's going to change some dynamics. That's going to change some dynamics. So let me give you point two. But before I even do that, let me say this too. Don't let it scare you. Okay? It's a gift. It's a gift of protection. Because sometimes God is trying to show you something. God will be trying to show you something about people or about situations, about environments. God will be trying to show you things. And so it can be a gift of protection. So don't let it scare you. Just seek the Lord, and the Lord will protect you. He will keep you. He will give you guidance at all times, and He'll never leave. So even when you think you've lost somebody, or lost the connection you once had with somebody, don't let that scare you. Don't let it scare you, because it could be a gift. It could be a gift. And it could be God letting you know, I want to take you higher. I want to take you higher than where your thoughts have been. And this person or this group is going to keep you from doing that. And so it's important to understand what is happening. So it's going to cost you some friendships. It's going to cost you some family ships. It's going to cost you some romantic, sometimes, relationships, some intimate relationships. But that's part of it. That's part of it. Let me give you point number two. What else will gaining wisdom cost you? Well, it will cost you your popularity. And so when you know that God has opened your eyes to some things, then what happens is your message changes. And so what I mean when I say that it will cost you your popularity, you've got to understand that I'm going to use our ultimate example. My ultimate example of this very point is Jesus himself. Jesus was, he was so unpopular because what happened was people didn't like his message because he was speaking truth. People didn't like his message because he was speaking against the things of the time, of the culture, right? So they didn't like his message. And he became unpopular. He became unpopular among people. And so you've got to understand that if Jesus had to go through this, then we will too. And so when you are doing the will of God and when you are doing what God has called you to do, and when you are getting this wisdom and gaining this wisdom in quest for this wisdom and this truth from God, then you got to understand that you may not be popular. You may not be very popular, right? And so your message is going to change. Because what happens is, see, you will go from being this, your message will go from this level of superficiality, if you will. It will go from this level of being superficial, right? Highlighting and talking about your life. To then, it goes into depth. You start moving from talking about getting your hair and nails done every week, and you start moving from talking about, being out, hanging out and having a good time with people. You start talking about those things, and then your conversation begins to get deep. You start actually talking about things that, affect people's spiritual walk. You start talking about things that affects people's mood and people's psyche, right? You start talking about things that will help people. And what happens? You become unpopular. People want to have their ears tickled by things that feel good. People want to have their ears tickled by things that sound good and that motivate them in the direction they are going, whether it's good or bad, whether it's great or not so great. People only want to hear the things that feel good. But when you start highlighting your experiences, right, and start talking about your struggles because of where God may have taken you from, when you stop highlighting your life and start glorifying God, your message is changing. And when your message is changing, like Jesus' message did, then you become unpopular. And so you've got to understand that that's going to cost you your popularity vote. Because when you're highlighting God's glory instead of your own life, that can change for people. People don't always want to hear that. People don't always want to deal with that because there's a certain reality that comes when you do that. There's a certain reality that has to be faced, that has to be dealt with. And people don't always want to deal with those things. And so you start to change your message and start to highlight your experiences and show the glory of God and lift up the glory of God. That's not always cool. So you got to understand that when your message changes, you become a little unpopular. But you got to be ready for that, because that's what having wisdom will cost you. It may cost you. And so especially when we live in a social media driven, quick Instagram, one snapshot picture world and culture, where the one picture you have to capture, you only got one shot to capture it. So you better make it your best. You better make it your prettiest. You better catch your good side and not the other side, right? That's the kind of culture we live in. And so people are not trying to hear or see or be a part a lot of times of that message when it changes. And it goes from, come get my hair done, get my nails done with me, and come shopping with me. And it starts to begin to reach a level of depth. That's hard. That's hard for some people to face because people only want that quick Instagram photo. And so it's going to cost you your popularity vote. You got to be ready for that. Let me quickly give you point number 3. Having wisdom is going to cost you your own expectations. And I want to really lift this one up because, listen, from a personal standpoint, there are a lot of expectations I have for my own life. And I thought that they were the best things for me. I really genuinely thought this was the direction I was supposed to be going in. I genuinely thought that what God has for me is this, because this is the best thing, right? I had a lot of expectations. But let me tell you something, beloved. You cannot win, and you cannot, and we live in a world where I believe people, we get so used to wanting everything to be a win that we don't deal well with losses. And the reality is that this life we live is a balancing force. There has to be a balancing force. It's just like the law of gravity. What goes up, got to come down. And so to balance out good, we have bad or evil. And to balance out, to balance out the ups, we have to have downs. And so life is about balancing that balancing force. And we have to understand that not every expectation we have is going to go the way that we envisioned it would go. And so sometimes it's going to cost you your expectations, your own expectations, the things that you expected that would happen, the things that you expected to do what you thought they would do because you thought it was best. The things that when you experience, you think that you ought to have this win. But in reality, that's actually where wisdom is. The wisdom is found in the losses. It's not found in the victories. The victories are going to come, yes, but the wisdom is found in the losses. And so we got to understand it and know that. And we've got to be prepared for that. We've got to be prepared for our own expectations to go, to be properly in its proper perspective. And we've got to know, and you've got to know how to handle that. You've got to know how to handle both gracefully. And I think that we've gotten so accustomed to thinking that life is only supposed to be wins and gains that I don't know if we know how to really truly handle the balancing force of life. There is balance. And so from this message today, I want you to know that above all else, submission to God is the key that will unlock the wisdom. That's first and foremost. And that's a truth that we have to be willing to accept and deal with first and foremost before we get into that, or before we even, understand wisdom in its fullest. And so my prayer for you is this, is that you will submit all things to God, and that you will submit your own understanding to God. And that along the way, you'll remember that it's going to cost you some relationships. It's going to cost you your popularity vote. And it's going to cost you your own expectations. But I want to lift you up right now, and I want to affirm to you and speak into your life that you got this. You got this. And I want you to remember that you to be open to learning and growing in God's wisdom. All right. That's it, y'all. And that ends this hour of the Wisdom Speaks podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and to leave me a review on our Facebook page, as well as share this episode with a friend. You may reach me with any questions or comments at thewisdomspeakspodcast@gmail.com. Connect with me on Instagram, Facebook, and on YouTube. If you would like to support this podcast, which would be very much appreciated, you can certainly do so by way of my website, CashApp, Venmo, or by becoming a member of my Patreon, all searchable under the Wisdom Speaks Podcast. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Have a great week.